time is 6 p.m. and I will call the Anacortes City Council meeting for February 22nd, 2021 to order. Miss Hunt, would you take the roll?
Mr. Carter?
Present.
Mr. Young?
Present.
Mr. Walters? Ms. Cleveland McGrath?
Here.
Ms. Moulton?
Here.
Mr. McDougall?
Here.
Mr. Miller?
Here.
Thank you.
Okay. So we're going to go to item 2A. This is an executive session. And we're going to go into executive session for approximately 30 minutes. This is for potential litigation or litigation per RCW 42.30.110, item 1.I. And we will be in session for at least 30 minutes, and then we'll come out of executive session and we'll go back into our normal agenda, and we'll be starting with item 3 at that time. So at this time, council, if you'll go to the other platform for executive session, attendees, we'll see you in a little, at least about a half hour. Okay, thank you.
Madam Mayor, you're muted.
Good evening. At this time, I will bring us out of executive session. No action was taken, and we'll resume our meeting. And, okay, I can see everyone now. I see that we have, the council is all present, and we also have 9 guests with us this evening. So, as I stated before, no action was taken in executive session. And we now will move to item 3, which is under announcements and committee reports. And the first item is our COVID-19 update. As of today, February 22nd, Island Hospital has tested 12,435 people since last March. They've identified 260 positive cases. They've admitted 42 people to the hospital, and then we've had 0 deaths at Island Hospital. On the vaccine front, Alien Hospital has administered 2,534 vaccines. 1,739 have received their first dose, and 795 have received their second dose. Island Hospital has no vaccine appointments available for the week of February 22nd, and the next update will be March 1st. And that is a distribution problem. It's because they're not getting the number of vaccines at this time that they need. In Skagit County, to date, we've had 4,077 positive cases of COVID, 58 deaths, and 256 people hospitalized. In the 98221 zip code, Skagit County believes there's 379 current positive cases of COVID. The COVID-19 testing site at the Skagit County Fairgrounds is to close permanently on March 13th. After that point, they're looking into some mobile testing setup, and they'll be communicating with the public on where those will be available moving forward. In Skagit County, the total number of vaccinations that have been administered is 22,512 doses. And in Washington State, let's see, online scheduling for vaccine appointments are closed at Skagit County. Also a vaccine shortage. Additional appointments may be added this week if appointments become available. But what you need to do if you want to sign up for the Skagit County vaccination, you need to check in on Saturday at noon. In the state of Washington, we've had 337,000 cases of COVID. We've had 4,886 deaths. As of last Monday, the North Region, which included Skagit County, Island County, Whatcom County, and San Juan County, moved into phase 2. And that means that the biggest change was it brought all of our restaurants and gyms to indoor capacity of 25%. Currently, we're meeting all 4 measures of the governor's metrics to be in phase 2. And we have a 32% decreasing trend in cases. And the metric required a 10% trend. We have a 17% decrease in COVID-19 hospitalizations. And the metric required a 10% decrease. And COVID-19 related, our ICU occupancy is 43%, and the goal was less than 90%. And that was occupancy for any type of thing, not just COVID. And the test positivity rate is 6%, and the goal was less than 10%. So we've done a lot of hard work in the region, and it's paying off. Last week, the governor signed into law House Bill 1368, which appropriates $2.2 million in federal funding that will be allocated in response to the COVID emergency. Some of this bill provides $114 million in assistance for K through 12 schools, $618 million for public health, and $365 million for emergency eviction, rental, utility assistance, and another $240 million for business assistance grants and more. In the United States, we've had 28 million cases. We've had over 500,000 deaths. Worldwide, we've had 112 million cases with 2.47 million deaths, and that's reported by the World Health Organization. And I did talk about checking back with Skagit County Health this Saturday. And same with Island Hospital, I would just keep checking their website. As soon as they have vaccines available, they'll open up for vaccines. So I implore you all to be patient just a little bit longer. It's a production and distribution problem from the federal level to the state. Are there any questions? All right, at this time, I'll go to item 3B, which is our Park and Recreation Committee report.
Mayor Gear,
Yes, Ms. Moulton.
thank you. The Parks and Rec Committee met last week with staff. It was Councilmember Young, Councilmember McDougall, and I, and we talked about a lot of things. The first one being Smiley's Bottom. Staff is working with the Department of Ecology to determine what reclamation work is necessary in that area, and they're looking at costs and options for that work. The next thing we talked about was the Whistle Lake Dam, which is a 100-year-old dam on our backup water supply. And ecology, we have to comply with state and federal regulations because it is a backup water supply. So for safety and emergency planning, and also to be careful of property owners downstream should that dam ever fail. So the city needs to come up with a management plan for the dam, and so that will be ongoing. The next thing we talked about was the Depot Plaza restroom, which has been installed as of February 3rd. Then there was a little bit of a weather delay, but there will be a soft opening of that before the farmers market opens in earnest in May. There was a little bit of a drainage issue. There was a low spot, so there will be a small contract adjustment coming to council. It will have timed locks like the restrooms at 22nd Street also as a point of interest. We talked about the cemetery expansion where there's been tons of water due to snow and rain, plus tree damage. And the crews are waiting for warmer weather to continue with the road work. It needs to be dry and about 40 degrees plus. The contract for the next phase of the cemetery expansion will come to council in June, and the work will begin on that phase in August. Rec programs will expand their offerings now that we're in phase 2. So that's exciting. And the senior center has been very active since they closed almost a year ago, doing some great virtual programming, about 20 programs they have ongoing. Meals on Wheels has 82 clients that they serve, up from 63 to 65. And the Aging Mastery program has given away about 160 starter kits. So they're doing a great job with continuing outreach and engagement with our seniors, which is fantastic.
So Carolyn, is that per day on those meals?
I believe, do they do it every day? You know,
Yeah, they do it Monday through Friday.
Okay, I think it's about 82 clients per day, yes.
That's great. Okay.
So up about a third from what they were pre-pandemic. So a lot of the people who are coming in person are now getting meals delivered.
That's great.
Thanks for asking. And in March, we will have an impact fee discussion, Parks and Rec impact fee discussions with Burke Consulting, and also talk about, again, Washington Parks fees, putting them on our unified fee schedule. And that is about it, unless Mr. Young has something to add.
Thank you, Ms. Moulton. You always do a fantastic job. The only thing I wanted to do an extra plug for was the library YouTube channel. I was so amazed at the things that are being offered on the YouTube, workouts and so many other stuff. So I just think it's a wonderful opportunity for, myself as well as constituents to take a look at the YouTube channel and enjoy it. They do a fantastic job. And quite honestly, I was amazed at all the things that they bring forward. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, Planning Committee, item C.
Yeah, Mayor Gear.
Yes, Ms. Cleo McGrath.
Yeah, thank you. So right before our council meeting today, Mr. Walters, Ms. Moulton, and I met to kind of do a brief overview and update of what's going on. We didn't have anything to really dive deep into, but we just wanted to check in on the various projects moving forward. First one is exciting news. The third draft of the critical areas ordinance has been completed by staff. And so they're going to do a coordinated review, open it to public comment, and then hopefully it will come in front of council at the end of March. So that's an exciting thing. Also in the month of March, the comprehensive plan and regulations are open for kind of our yearly review for modifications. I believe there's a couple housekeeping clarifications that staff wants to do, and there's a couple other projects that might come before council for our yearly update. The R4 bonus height provisions is another project we've been trying to delay until we can all meet in the same building so we can have some good discussions. And we're hoping to, the planning department's hoping to kind of do a presentation to council, get some direction from both the public and council, and then take that work back to the planning commission for some finessing and work at that level. So we haven't forgotten about it. We know it's a really important thing for our community, and we want to keep moving forward on it. There's some small details with the shoreline master plan that are being worked on right now, but that is in the process of getting in front of us also. The only other couple items was we've got some folks who are staying at Washington Park, and it's worked really well in partnership with the Family Center. But because of the summer seasons starting to pick up and camping, we're working on figuring out if there's an alternative place for those folks to be and taken care of. And then the final thing that's a little bit more of our HACS committee, but it's the same group, but we wanted to give an update, is the cold weather shelter program. We're just waiting on HUD for final approval, but everything is good to go. So once we get that, that will also be provided. You know, we talked a little bit about, we're expecting to see some rental assistance programs, funds become available in the near future. And we just want to make sure that we are doing our best to get that information out to the people who would benefit from it. So you guys might be hearing a little bit more on that and figuring out ways to convey that information and make it as accessible as possible. So I think that is about it. Planning, I know Planning Commission is getting excited and they'd like to have some more projects to work on. So we are going to try to figure out if there's some items or issues that we would appreciate them doing a little bit of a deep dive and doing some prep work on. So that's come to us, and we appreciate their eagerness to participate even more. So we're going to try to find a way to utilize that energy. I think that's it, unless anyone else has anything to add.
Any additions? Okay, so this time it's item 4. This is open for public comment. And this, if you would like to speak to the council on anything that is not on the agenda tonight, because if it is on the agenda, you can participate during that presentation. Raise your hand and we'll let you speak now to the council. If it's on the agenda, you can speak in a little bit. Okay, I don't see any hands. So we'll move on then to item 5, which is our consent agenda. And we have items A through C. We have minutes, approval of claims, and resolution 3019 waiving the state competitive bidding requirements for the purchase of the Crayley Fiber TMM series for a microduct system for the city's gigabit passive optical network, or GPON.
Hey, Gary.
Mr. Young.
I move we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Miller, a second by Mr. Young. Is there any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. At this time, we'll move to item 6 under other business. 6A, and this is open for public comment. And this is a request from the Thompson family to return the donated Thompson train. This is a discussion with possible action this evening. Ms. Swetnam, will you introduce the subject?
I would be happy to. Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council, and members of the audience. I'll keep my comments brief, but just to introduce the issue tonight. So tonight before council is a request from the Thompson family that the Thomas G. Thompson Jr. train be returned to them. Just to give kind of the procedural background here, council in October 26th of 2020 considered an offer from Brett Iwan to purchase the train from the city, and council ultimately decided to deny the purchase offer and directed staff to and the mayor to come back to council in 6 months with an update on a plan for a static display of the train. And so on January 8th of this year, the Thompson family, through their attorney, Lisa Carney, submitted a request to the city that the train be returned to them. I believe that Lisa Carney is in attendance and is representing the family, and I will be available throughout the discussion in case council has any questions.
Okay, so I think at this time, if Ms. Carney, if you wanted to talk to the council first, then the council can ask questions, we can have a discussion, and then I'll invite the audience into the discussion. Ms. Carney, are you there? Ms. Carney, would you like to speak or should I move on?
I am here. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Welcome, Ms. Carney.
Hello. Okay. Madam Mayors and members of the City Council. My name is Lisa Carney. I'm here on behalf of Ann Thompson and her family. Thank you for your time tonight. Regarding the Thomas G. Thompson Jr. train, it's apparent from the materials contributed for the meeting tonight and the discussions over many months that there are passionate viewpoints on what has happened to the train since 2012 and what should happen going forward. The decision by Ann Thompson to request the city of Anacortes join in the rescission of the 2012 agreement was not made lightly, but there's too much at stake and too much time has passed to do nothing. This train is an original creation of Thomas G. Thompson Jr. It was his time and his money, passion, intellect, and dedication that built this train, and he built the track it could run on. Not just the actual track, but negotiations with city government at the time to access the path where the train could run. This was not over a few weekends or a few months, but for years. First, he built it, and then he shared this creation with the Anacortes community. It was a gift to all who experienced the train. And in 1999, he died. It was his wish that the train be part of a static display to be enjoyed by many, but that it would cease operations. His wife, Ann, in 2012, donated the train to the city of Anacortes with conditions to care for it in a specific manner that was to honor and respect her husband, the creator. What has happened with the train since 2012 appears to have been seen in many different ways. From the Thompson family view, there was an agreement as part of a donation, and the conditions of that agreement have not been met. This conclusion is based on what actually occurred. Many years of effort were invested by volunteer groups to steam up the train, which was not an option under the agreement, and significantly fewer efforts were invested to build a static display, which was a condition of the agreement. The Thompson family's view that the train is not safely housed is based on photos showing deterioration of the train in its current location and the opinion of a person with expertise in steam engines. Their concerns for the protection of the train are based on their commitment to honor and respect the work of Thomas G. Thompson Jr. The Thompson family has nothing to gain in dismissing or demeaning the efforts of the volunteers that brought the train back to Anacortes. Their request now is not intended to disrespect the volunteers who are involved, but leaving things as they have been does not respect Mr. Thompson. Good people have been associated with this train since its return to Anacortes in 2012, and still, actions related to the train were taken that were improper and unauthorized. These actions do not appear to be in bad faith or with malicious intent. Rather, persons with a vision and great memories of the past perhaps got caught up in the magic of a steam train and may have neglected to consider the agreement, the best interest of the Thomas G. Thompson train, and the city of Anacortes. One council person suggested the acquisition of the train was improper, again, not due to ill will, rather a donation was accepted without consideration of the cost to properly manage the donation. Shortly after the donation, Incorrect assumptions were made and acted on. The agreement of the donation was for a static display of the train, but parties who got involved were focused on steaming up the train for operation in the community, a complete violation of the agreement. Again, no ill will is claimed, but there were huge gaps in communications. There was a complete disconnect between the intention of the donor and the actions of the agents of the city. And time passed. The train is stored where the donor has huge concerns for its safety, and photos bear out that it is deteriorating from lack of necessary maintenance. And if there has been success in raising funds for a static display, there does not appear to have been any action taken with those funds. There was an agreement related to a donation with conditions. Some actions occurred that were prohibited, and other actions did not occur that were required. As a legal matter, this is a breach of contract. It's unclear where the expectation came from that a donation of the Thomas G. Thompson train to the city of Anacortes for a static display resulted in members of the community believing they were getting back the steam engine that had retired 20 years previously. However, the Thompson family cannot be responsible for expectations. They understand that the disposition of the train is not a pain-free decision, but rescinding the 2012 agreement is the right decision legally and because it's in the best interest of the Thomas G. Thompson train and the city of Anacortes. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Carney. Council, do you have any questions for Ms. Carney before I ask the attendees? Okay. All right, members of the public, if anyone would like to speak to the council at this time on this matter, please raise your hand and I'll call on you. I am not. Okay. First of all, we have Dennis Clark.
Good evening. This is Dennis Clark, 3805 M Avenue. I encourage the city to return the train to the Thompson family. I offer 4 points. First, the train was not an outright gift. The train was a type of restricted donation for a specific purpose that apparently has not been met. If what the family states in their letters is true, then the city has not fulfilled its responsibilities under the contract governing the donation. Second, the city already invests heavily in preserving its history through the Anacortes Museum, Maritime Heritage Center, and W.T. Preston. These assets are more important and relevant to the history of Anacortes than the train. Third, the people who claim they can raise the funds and manage the train on behalf of the city have not shown an ability to translate their words into reality. Moreover, they propose to operate the train in Anacortes, which is highly unlikely for many reasons. Fourth, the city has spent too much time on this topic. City Council goes round and round on this topic and yet never gets anywhere. This is an indication that there is nowhere to go. In conclusion, the bottom line is this: please return the train to the Thompson family with the community's thanks. The city has other important issues to work on. Thank you for your consideration and your service.
Thank you, Dennis. Dave Sim.
Hey, good evening. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
All right. So I've got my statement I want to read. So first of all, I want to say, good evening, council members. Thank you for your support regarding the Anacortes Railway Group's efforts to keep the Thomas G. Thompson Jr. train here for the citizens of Anacortes. As you know, on October 26th, the council voted 5-2 to reject the unsolicited offer from the California buyer. Council tasked Mayor Gear to give an update to council on the community's efforts to display the train here in 6 months. Since that meeting, the Anacortes Railway Group has made significant headway. We have identified a major donor and had met with Mayor Gear, who helped arrange a viewing of the train on December 7th for our donor. During our viewing of the train and the shed, everything appeared well cared for, and I don't recall any evidence of leaks or wet concrete in the shed. The shed doors were securely locked by very sound commercial grade lock sets that could not be removed or just cut with a bolt cutter. On that day, the farmer's market was going on, and when the shed doors were open, we had a multitude of people wanting to see the train or enter the shed. Only our group was allowed inside the shed on that day. On January 20th, the Anacortes Railway Group submitted a letter to Mayor Gear containing a working outline of our proposal and options. We were not aware of the January 8th letter from the Seattle attorney at that time. Our plans satisfy either of the MOAs passed in 2012 or 2019. We requested Mayor Gear's feedback, and I asked if we should proceed with city staff to continue our efforts. Mayor Gear responded later that afternoon stating that she would review our plan and get it to council by Monday. On January 25th, Mayor Gear directed the city attorney to forward me the letter from the Thompsons' attorney rescinding their donation of 2012. I reached out myself to the Thompson family by calling Hayden Thompson on February 11th. We had a 30-minute conversation, and I told him about our group's proposal. I asked if he would consider delaying his February 28th deadline imposed by their lawyer's letter to return the train. I also suggested we could meet together in person or by phone to discuss the options we had in our proposal. Mr. Thompson said he was going to discuss my call with his mother and their lawyer and get back to me. After almost a week went by with no reply, I called him back. When he answered, he said he couldn't talk because he was driving. We agreed I could call him the next day, February 17th. On the afternoon of the 17th, I read his and Mr. Iwan's letters dated that same day, February 17th, in the city council packet of materials for tonight's meeting. I knew another call would not be productive after reading their letters in the meeting packet. I understand that tonight's council meeting is to decide on an action or response to the family's lawyer's letter, and it's not about our group's progress. But we have no say in handling of the lawyer's wishes. We would ask that you see the facts for what they are versus the inflammatory and fabricated claims mentioned in those letters. I'm also here to assure the council that the Anacortes Railway Group has the financial backing with our group and our donor. Our group will have skin in the game also. We have the administrative support to bring any of the options we submitted in our January 20th letter to Mayor Gear to fruition. Our plan offers to remove the city of both financial and staff obligations related to the Thomas G. Thompson Jr. train, along with any equipment upon approval. Please allow us the opportunity to continue on our course and keep the train in Anacortes for its citizens and visitors to enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sim. Are there any other comments from the audience? Okay, William Campbell.
Can you hear me okay?
We can. Welcome.
Thank you. William Campbell, 1609 11th Street here in Anacortes. Hey, I was one of the guys that went down and helped rescue that train from the dungeon of a basement in a steam plant down in Seattle. The care of that train at that point was in horrible condition. I mean, the dusty stuff was all over the inside of the cars. I remember sitting there talking to Ann Thompson, and she was extremely excited that train was coming back to town. She was, my children, I mean, the whole group of us that went down there to bring that back to town, everybody, and including Ann, from what I can remember, was talking about it running again. I've never heard that. The group that we put together to do it, that was the whole belief behind the whole thing, is that we would bring it back to Anacortes and keep it here for next generations to see and whatnot. You know, it's only been a few years since it's come back. It's nothing like that's going to happen overnight. And I believe that that train should stay in town for all to see and hopefully someday run on again. I would love to see that come back. It's really all I got. Thank you, folks.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Are there any other comments at this time? All right, I'll circle back to the attendees and I'll hand it over to the council now for discussion. But if you have additional comments, raise your hand and I will come back to you. Okay, council, what is your pleasure?
Mayor Gear?
Mr. Miller.
Well, you know, obviously I'm sad that the family feels this way. But obviously through the reading of the 2012, the 2019 council's discussion and vote in October, we're going down a path to try to ultimately follow the original agreement of a static display. I don't want to get into the argument. We've talked about this a lot. To touch on the individual points, the train has been brought out a few times. Again, the council voted to go down the path of a static display. Again, I'm saddened that we're kind of bringing a adversarial relationship with the family. That's the last thing that I think the city wants to do. Certainly, the last thing I want to do. But sometimes the government, the state, local, federal, whatever, doesn't move as fast as you might want it to get to where originally the family wanted the city to be, which is a static display. It was a donation to the city. I think returning it at this point, it's too late. I think we can still honor the wishes of the family by moving forward. I think the Anacortes Railway Group has a great plan. I think there were a number of distractions about trying to run it. That's never been what I read into any of the background materials. Obviously, it happened before many of our time, most of all of us, our time on council. But again, I think we should continue down the path that council had voted for in October, and try to get to where we were planning on going and did on some occasions, but not to the satisfaction of the family. I get that, but I don't think anybody on council thinks that if we returned it to the family, they wouldn't sell it to the Mr. Iwan, I think it is. I don't think I have any illusions that that's what would happen. So again, I think we should press down with our direction that we provided in October, and I think the Anacortes Railway Group is probably that one, but I leave that up to the mayor to say, okay, yep, that's the path. And again, there's been very little cost to the city of Anacortes as far as the storage. I expect no cost to the city of Anacortes to continue down the path of the static display. So that's what I have to say about it.
Thank you, Mr. Miller.
Mayor Gear.
Mr. Young.
I agree with Mr. Miller. I think, with the family's been through a lot, and I get it, but I also say that, it's just been, as far as communication, it's been a hard thing. And, moving here, I realized early on when I was seeing those small tracks around the city of Anacortes, I thought, what in the world are those things? No train could be on it. And then as I learned more and heard about the story of the Tommy Thompson train, it was amazing. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think moving us forward from the original rescue of the train in 2012, and I think that there were some subsequent I think there was a video of Miss Thompson and her glee and joy at bringing the train back home to Anacortes. And then also, I think at early points, there were some, the Museum Foundation had some donations that was set aside or put forward for a static display. So I think that the intent was there with that first part of it. But I think where we are now is that with feeling so tied up, I do think that the city deserves one more chance to try to make good on a promise that Mr. Thompson himself wanted, but also to honor the work and the heritage and the gift that he did to our fair city. From what I can tell now, with even the local train group, or even the city, there's a lot of initiative. There's a lot of resources that are now at the table, and there's a serious effort. We voted 5-2 to authorize the city to come up with a plan. And this is only a few months later, and I think that we deserve to give that shot. And so, I'm with Mr. Miller. I do think that we will honor Mr. Thompson. I'm going to commit to that. But I do believe that the train should stay here in Anacortes.
Okay. Mr. Watson, I'm going to let the council finish talking and then I'll call on you. Go ahead, council members. Anyone want to talk yet? Okay, I'll call on Mr. Watson then. Mr. Watson, what would you like to tell the council tonight?
Can you hear me now?
We can. Welcome.
All right, Lloyd Watson, 1215 41st Street. I also was called to bring that train back with Lakeside Industries, William Campbell. And yes, we went down there to the Seattle City Light steam engine, or the steam plant they used to make power at. And it took hours to dig that train out from all kinds of neglected vehicles. And when we finally got to the train, within hours of manual work to dig that thing out, we were able to bring everything back to Anacortes. And I, too, was also on the assumption that we were going to get that train running. And we did the 4th of July parade. And Mrs. Thompson was well dressed for that parade. And it was pretty neat to have my family inside that train that I once rode in when I was a kid. So I think we all had a vision that that was going to run again. That's about what I have to say.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Watson. Okay, council, continue your discussion.
Mayor Gear,
Ms. Moulton.
could we talk a little bit more about our expectations for what will happen from the 6-month date? Could you clarify that a little bit?
Well, I figured in March, I would come forward with a plan for a static display. I've had some preliminary conversations. I've inspected the present train shed and what's going on there, what could be improved there for, perhaps a temporary one until we could do fundraising for another kind. But as was stated earlier, when the shed was opened in December, the community was quite excited to see that train. So anyway, so I have had some discussions. I'm coming back in March with a plan, and that's where we are at this point. I felt I still had another about 6 weeks to pull it together.
Okay, so thank you for that. My concern is that in reading over the history, there have been groups since 1999 who have wanted to have a train running, and there are a lot of obstacles, and I appreciate the little engine that could mindset. I wonder how much money I guess I am concerned about funding and where that will come from. And with so much that the city has been under pressure with revenue and financing for things like staff and a hiring freeze and our road maintenance, I would like to caution against using any city funds for the train when we have very great needs of our citizens and our infrastructure that need to be addressed. So I think it would be great if the railway group has a donor and this is something that they can do all the lifting on financially, because I personally don't see that as a priority for city funds.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Walton.
Here.
Mr. Walters.
I know how many people in this community adore this train, and I hope that the family appreciates that this question mark that we're currently at about the future of the train really does turn on how much love people in this community have for the train. Because if this was almost any other artifact given to the museum or not, I tend to think that if we had not followed the wishes of the donor, regardless of whether we had a contract obligation or not, I think if they came to us and said, well, we want it back, I think we'd probably give it to them. I am fairly distressed by the photos submitted into the record that shows water damage and chipped paint and missing pieces and tarnished brass on the train. I also expect that if the train were to be run, that it would suffer quite a bit more damage, simply because of our weather here and the fact that the train is an art piece. I think you would build a different train if you were expecting to run the train on a continuous basis for many, many years. It'd be more weatherproof, would have different fabric in the seats and those kinds of things. Plus, there are all those obstacles to actually running the train. And I know that some people's desire to keep the train here turns on the desire to run the train again. And there's also a difference between running the train very occasionally, like maybe once a year, and running the train very continuously or for many months of a year. And we haven't really explored that. But if we were to keep the train in town with some kind of static display, I don't know that the family would be satisfied with that. I don't know that our community would be satisfied with that. But I also have not seen any proposal to do that. I know that there are various plans around, but they don't have pro formas. They involve transferring the train to other entities, which I would oppose. If we're transferring the train, I don't think we should be transferring it to anyone without the consent of the family or to the family. I have asked before that we be presented with real options, and I think that would be in line with how council voted a couple months ago, a proposal for an actual static display that the city would own and operate and admit people to, with a price tag and with a location. And then we can compare that to other options like returning it to the family. But until we have that information, I don't feel very well equipped to make a decision about it. And my no vote before reflects that lack of information. I am very concerned about the fact that we need a third fire station and we need more firefighters. And the reason we need those firefighters and that fire station is response time. And the reason response time matters is that people die when you don't have good response time. And I think that is very much more important than any aspect of the train, regardless of how important it is to people's memories of actually riding it. And I've heard from quite a few people who didn't live here when the train was run, and they're very excited about the train too. But really, I think it's the childhood memories of people in the train that matter the most. So I would suggest that we put off making any kind of decision about this until we have that proposal that the mayor was working on, mayor and staff were working on, and that proposal come with the critical details, a location, a price, and a timeline. And we don't make any decision about not returning the train to the family, and we don't make any decision about selling the train, and that what we do is postpone this matter until we have that proposal so we can evaluate it and evaluate all these options together.
Thank you, Mr. Walters.
Yeah, good.
Mr. Young.
With all due respect to Mr. Walters, I disagree. I think we voted 5-2 for the city to come up with a proposal for a static display. We did not place the conditions upon that 5-2 vote for it also having a physical location. I think the assumption is that there would be some initial modifications to the current building that it's in to ensure that it's safe and everything else, that is well taken care of. And the question of whether to run or not to run, I think wasn't the question that originally brought us this to council. Quite honestly, it was an unsolicited bid for an asset that was not surplused and obviously discussed at a deeper level for something we didn't know was for sale. So we had an offer for something that wasn't for sale that we were entertaining. I'm sort of not wanting to deal with this a seventh time. I think this is at least 6 times or we've come up with dealing with this one issue of the train. And quite honestly, I think we've already really voted on it. The local train group, to my understanding, has already volunteered to not only help raise money, but to fix and to repair an initial static display to work with what we've got in order to ensure the care of the train. I do remind council that it was the local train group in whatever iteration, several of the same members are still there, that went down, got the train after it lasted 13 years in Seattle, brought it back, was gifted to the city. They lovingly cared for it and recertified the boilers, did some repairs on it until they were stopped by the city. And not only was there a $50,000 foundational donation toward the train by the Museum Foundation for its care. So I'm saying that we've already been through this a number of times. I just simply don't want to go through it a 7th time when council really has already made a determination of 5-2. That's just my position.
Thank you. Christina, Jeremy, if you're ready, I'll have you go ahead. If not, I've got the audience.
Yeah, if it's okay, Mayor Guerra, I will go next.
Go for it.
This is one of those situations that occurred, in 2012. And I really, really hope with the help of our in-house counsel does not ever occur again. So I want to start with that. And we also have two sides about wanting to keep the train, and then the family who built and constructed and loved and cared for the train wanting to have it go to a different path. Both are very, very valid, and pains me to disappoint one or the other. And so that means we have to go back to our original contract in 2012, is my opinion. And we need to do what's best for the train. And so that, what that original contract, I would say we have not failed to do what that original intent was. We have not actually been able to, it's supposed to be cared for, and efforts will be made to raise funds for an eventual display structure. Nothing has an end date associated with it, or a final product that had to be required to otherwise, being returned to the family. But at the same time, we have not been able to appreciate the train to its fullest capacity. I think the fact that we had it up and running makes me uncomfortable because it doesn't follow the 2012 agreement we had with them. That train had been retired, and it was the city's responsibility to respect the fact that it had been retired. And so while there's community members who wanted to run it, I understand they're probably the intent they wanted was good, but it doesn't follow that contract. So we've gotten ourselves into some really murky waters. And I would probably, I do echo the point that Ms. Moulton made, is that the city has much bigger issues to focus on. I think we need to be focusing on housing, public works, making sure the utilities are there, public safety is there. That's what we should be working on. Unfortunately, we haven't found a resolution for this. So my inclination is then to take it a step further, which Mr. Walters suggested. And it's March, we need to have some kind of proposal on the table We need to be able to review it. It needs to not only have a location, it needs to have an explanation of funding and where that funding is coming from, or what our real plan for how we will fund it. Because I think we need to do what's best for the train. And while I want it to stay here, if we can show that that is a good long-term outcome, if we're going to kick it down the road another 8, 10, 12 years, then what are we doing? It's something that we look at every, a couple of times a summer. And while it's wonderful to have it, an object doesn't need to be put in a shed, right? So then maybe the best thing for the train is for us to go back and reconsider the donor's intent. It's a really unfortunate situation. I wish there was an easy way. Emotion and logic and law are all kind of mixed together. I appreciate the family coming forward and being really clear about their requests. It's been helpful. And I also think it was like their requests have been done in good faith, which means we need to now move forward in good faith. And if we can't fill their wishes, then we need to, if we can't fulfill their wishes within the city, then we need to seriously consider, what the best options are for that train to be enjoyed by as many people as possible.
Thank you, Ms. Cleveland. Mr. Carter, or do you want me to go to the audience?
No, so my feelings towards it is, I really sympathize for the family. But I also feel for, the train and understanding Mr. Thompson's original request that the train doesn't run again and that it was, being displayed. And, we had voted on that before to actually start to take those steps to move forward. And we are there. We are starting to move forward with making a display. And I want to see the plan for it. I want to see where it's going and the financial backing is. And, Mr. Walters and Ms. Cleveland McGrath brought up a good point, and Ms. Moulton, that the city has other things to focus on, and a lot of that funding, I don't think we can handle a lot of that funding. So having these private donors is going to be a really good thing for us. But I do want to see where that is all coming from. But I do believe that, we did make a decision to keep it here, make the static display, and we should continue moving forward with that.
Mayor Gear?
Yes, Ms. Moulton.
Just to add to Mr. Walters, Ms. Cleveland McGrath, and Mr. Carter's points, I think that a plan is necessary because otherwise we will be talking about this again and again. So if this plan isn't ready in 2 months, I would like to have a timeline for when it is, because if this is not feasible with a location, a price, a timeline, and a feasible, actionable plan, then I think that we're doing everyone a disservice by just continuing to push it farther down the road in the hopes that something will eventually materialize. So when we discuss this in March or April, I would really like to press that point that this needs to be real and actionable, because there have been a lot of dreams and a lot of ideas, but none of them seem very concrete to me. So we need that information in order to make sure that this train is treated the way that it needs to be.
Okay. Ann Bowman, you have your hand up. Would you like to address the council? Ann, you're muted.
Yeah, John Bowman.
Oh, John. Welcome, John.
Oh, thank you. Well, I would certainly listen with interest to the discussion tonight of pro and con, this and that. My comments aren't particularly in order, but I guess in the overall scheme of things, and I'm part of the Anacortes Railway group, we did make what we made to the city council was an offer with four options, which pretty well covered the field of 4 different ways of accomplishing the objective of keeping the train and the cars in Anacortes for 2 reasons. 1 reason for display, 2 might be for operation, not exclusive, either one, and different ways of accomplishing this, which involves anything from the city first of all, we have to know who controls the train. It's not clear to our group who we made the offer, but it's not clear to us when we made it to the city who we are really making the offer to. Who owns the train? Obviously, that's the discussion tonight. Who owns the train? Once we know who owns the train, that's not a problem. We then can enter into a discussion. As Mr. Walters said, there are 3 things he didn't know: price, time limit, or timeline, or money. The price can be very well determined. The time limit can be in the agreement, and the money can be satisfied if it takes money to convince our partner, whoever it is. We would be happy to confirm a certificate of competency, let's say, so that they have no objection to where the money is coming from. Usually a deal is made and then the people say, okay, where's the money? And then you solidify things and get in serious comment. I'll close down with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bowman. Okay, so council, what I'm hearing is, it seems to me that you all are leaning towards having a presentation by the end of March, 1st of April. I think my deadline was March 26th, so it might roll into the following Monday. And you want to know where the location, want to know where the funding is, and you want a solid plan. And I think that's a reasonable, and that's based on the recommendation that you asked for in October. And that's what you're asking for tonight before you'd even want to entertain a discussion with the family or to go another direction. You want that information first. Am I capturing that correctly?
Mayor Gear?
Yes, Mr. Miller.
Yeah, I think you're capturing that correctly, at least from my end. I just want to comment on a couple of things that the other council members said about it. Again, the whole running the train, I think, has been a distraction for a long time. It's maybe like me talking about trying to get the Preston running or something. But again, my point is, I would encourage my fellow council members to make sure they ask the right questions of maybe the railway group or mayor. Tell us on staff who's the point person on this. Because if I look at option 1 presented by the Anacortes Railway Group, I'm like, yeah, that looks pretty good. But I would encourage my fellow council members to ask the more details. It's hard for a 501c3 to say, okay, come up with all this money and give it to the city when they're not even sure that council is going to vote and say, yeah, we've decided to give the train back to the family. So again, I just encourage council to ask the very direct questions, and I'd encourage them to look at the option 1 that seemed to make sense to me, because I have zero intention. I said it in October when we voted for this. zero intention to spend any city funds, besides the staff time, obviously our time. This is not going to compete with firefighters in my mind. So I think that's another little distraction there. That's never been my intent. My intent has always been to honor the original agreement and the discussions that we've had to have some sort of static display in Anacortes. So again, sorry for a little long-winded answer to yes, Mayor. I think you've captured what we're talking about.
Okay, we have two attendees that want to speak to us now again. Dave Sims, you got your hand up. Go ahead, and then Mr. Watson.
Okay, hey, thanks again, Mayor Gear. So my concerns with this thing is you've got a target that keeps moving. When I started on this thing back in December of 2019, the whole issue was passing a new MOA so the train could run, which supposedly was for the California buyer. So the council passes that. So the topic is made that anybody can show the 5 conditions, they can run the train. And the question was asked, the question was answered, yes, anybody. So we go down that path because now you have this new current agreement with the family of what they want to do. So we come up with our plan to run it down Tommy Thompson, we present it to the council, and then get kicked to the curb on that. So then we say, okay, fine, we'll go back to the 2012 MOA and do the static display. So tonight I'm hearing from the Thompson family's lawyer that Tommy Thompson, when he died, wanted a static display and he did not want it running. So I don't understand, if it would go to California, you'd be in violation of that unless that's just an emotional thing and not a contract. Our group is not doing anything that would take funds from the city. With no firefighters, no house is going to burn down because the train is there. That's just no comparison to think anything that way. Our funds would go through to make the display self-sufficient going forward. There would be no city staff. There would be no city funding. The only thing we would have to work out details for being on city property, if that's where it's located, with insurance and other things to cover that we would have to pay. We're not expecting the city to pay anything for it. We're just looking to display the train here. And personally, I don't think if you ever got the chance to run the train, I would never run it with the 3 cars that Tommy made. Those things are just too nice to have the general public ride around on that thing. They should be for display. And if you were going to run that, run some other cars behind it, if you ever had the chance to run passengers. So there you go. That's my thing. Oh, but then what happens here tomorrow morning when you get another letter from a lawyer who says, look, you got a February 28th deadline that, from my way of thinking, the city council hasn't dealt with tonight. You get a letter tomorrow from them saying you've got now a March 5th deadline. We've been put off a month. Well, this whole thing was going on. We sent the letter January 20th. Here we are, February 22nd. We've been stalled out by this. It's everything we do is we come up with a plan and then we react to something that comes from either the family or Mr. Iwan in California, and the council puts it on the agenda. They change the target, and then we got to go and reevaluate where we're at to go with the council. So I think you also have to identify if it's the council agenda or a family agenda or a California agenda or a lawyer agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Watson, did you still want to speak? Okay. Oh, yeah. Just a moment. No, wait. Well, I'd like to let, go ahead. I have, who wanted to speak, and then I have Lisa Carney.
Anthony Young.
Yeah, go ahead, Anthony, and then Ms. Carney.
Okay, I thought Mr. Carter too had something to say, but
We'll
anyway.
bring Mr. Carter in too.
All right. Well, but I think the Dave Sims makes a great point. Mr. Bowman asked who is not really clear who owns the train. I think tonight in clarity, regardless of what we decide to do with the train, it is owned by the city. So at that point, unless Ms. Swetnam can disagree with that point, the city does own the train. And I think she's nodded her head to indicate to Mr. Bowman that the city does own the train. So your proposal would come to the city. Right. Secondarily to that, I agree with Mr. Sims. The real question before council is not that we haven't already voted on what we said we wanted done and what charges we asked the administration to do. That's the question. And the reason we have this matter before us right now is because of threat of legal action. And the question really before council tonight is what do we want to do, because there's a deadline. And I think at the end of the day, my position is really that with all due respect to all of the people whose heart has been in this, council has already indicated what it wanted done. We've already decided that the mayor and staff and team will come back with a proposal to come before council. So if this discussion we're having is about what we do based upon the letter we received from the attorney, I think we need to decide what we want. And personally, I make a motion that we take no action, or that the council has already voted to take an action. And we fully expect the city to come forward with a plan of action.
Okay.
Mayor Gear.
There's a motion on the floor.
Mayor Gear.
Yes, Mr. Carter.
I just wanted to say, it kind of echoed a little bit what Mr. Young got to, is that my understanding is we already made the decision to go forward with the static display, and all we were waiting for from the city was just that plan. And not that we were, and what I was saying earlier is that we weren't waiting for the plan from the city to decide if we were going to give the train back or not, but we have already decided to move forward with that static display. So if that motion from Mr. Young, I'll go ahead and second that.
Mr. Young, can you restate your motion? Or Ms. Hunt, did you capture Mr. Young's motion?
If I understood Mr. Young correctly, his motion was to take no action. I'm not quite sure how you vote on that.
Well, I guess what I was attempting to do is to say that the city has already voted, and that if this meeting is to determine what we do about the notice from the letter from the attorney, I think that I'm sort of making the motion that the city has already made we've already decided what we want it done, and I move that we instruct the city, meaning the mayor and staff, to move forward with what we agreed to in the 5-2 vote.
Mr. Young, just for clarification, that action's already been taken and voted on by the council, so this would be a
I guess what I'm trying to say then, if that's the case, then we take no action, because I think if what I'm hearing from part of council now is that we're actually trying to modify what we already ruled on.
Okay.
We're trying to
You
add
want
to
since
it.
you don't want to take any action?
Correct.
You want to withdraw your motion?
Unless there's a better motion,
Mayor Gear,
Mr. Walters,
I
thank you.
maybe can shed a little bit of light just to get a motion on the table. First of all, the motion that Mr. Young refers to was that council reject any current proposals to purchase the Thompson train, stop any current efforts to sell the Thompson train, and that the mayor report to council in 6 months on a plan for a static display of the train. I'm reading from what is a very excellent presentation on the Anacortes Museum website in sort of a PowerPoint format of the history of the train, and that's the last slide, and that is, I take it verbatim from our minutes. So I read that as not really a decision to build a static display or to do anything in particular once we have the plan, but what it is a decision to stop work on selling it and can start work on actually putting together a plan for it. So if that was the direction that we wanted to go tonight, I think maybe one appropriate motion might be to just move to postpone consideration indefinitely of this issue until such time as someone wants to bring it up again.
Is that?
And a yes vote on a motion to postpone consideration indefinitely is a vote to take no action.
Is there a second?
Well, okay, is Mr. Young's motion off the table then?
It had a second.
Okay. So were you rewording Anthony's motion? Is that what you were doing?
I was offering a suggestion.
Okay.
Mr. Young, you could rescind your motion and Mr. Carter could rescind his second, and you could choose to take a second on Mr. Walters' motion if that's more congenial to what you're thinking.
I will. I think, well, I guess, this is sort of I'm really hoping that we don't move forward. We've already decided. So if that is the motion, I will rescind my motion and then I will amend it to what Mr. Walters said under the conditions that we indefinitely postpone this and just wait for the city and staff to come forward with a plan of action.
So you rescinded yours. Mr. Carter, have you rescinded your second and Mr. Young's?
I do.
Okay. So Mr. Walters has a motion on the floor.
I believe Mr. Young said he seconded it.
You did second it, Mr. Young? Did you? Did you? I didn't hear that.
Yeah, I'll second that motion under that
Thank
condition.
you. So a motion by Mr. Walters, a second by Mr. Young. Marcia, can you read back that motion?
So the motion on the floor is to postpone indefinitely consideration. Mr. Walters, did you intend consideration of the family's request to return the train? That's what we're postponing indefinitely?
I guess so.
Yes.
To postpone consideration indefinitely of the Thompson family request to return the train, which was seconded by Mr. Young.
Okay. Ms. Hunt, would you call for a vote?
Mayor Gear?
Yes, Mr. Walters.
We previously had a hand up that you were going to call on. Did that go away?
The hand went away.
Okay.
Okay.
So I would like to add just something else before we talk about this again. I do recommend that
we haven't
everybody.
taken a vote.
Right.
Okay, go ahead.
I do recommend that everybody check out that 3-part PowerPoint presentation on the Anacortes Museum website about the train. It lays out, I think, in really good detail with citations to primary source documents, information that everybody should have that wants to engage in this debate. I would point out also that this came to us in 2014 as a proposal for some kind of new capital facility to house the train and a fire engine and an ambulance and some other stuff maybe. And at that time we asked for, I think, or at least I asked for similar.
There's a motion on the floor and you're about to go, in my opinion, with all due respect, into this huge diatribe about what we already know and what we've already discussed. I'm just saying, let us take a vote and we can put this to rest.
Motion to postpone indefinitely is debatable in my recollection. The things that we asked for back in 2014 are the same elements that we require now to have a new capital facility: price, a funding plan, location, and a timeline. And I think that if we had had that back in 2014, and I think we've made a lot of progress in moving towards having processes that require those things for capital facilities, I think we might have, and obviously can't tell you this for sure because I haven't had any personal conversations with anybody, I think we might have a solution that could satisfy people, maybe on both sides and maybe even in the family. I don't know, but I sure would like to have staff really do a job to come up with that kind of proposal.
Okay.
I think we were kind of on a track back in 2014. It just was a surprise for us. And it didn't come with all the price tags and the funding proposals. But I would encourage the mayor to try very hard to put together a real proposal this time. Failure is okay, so long as the effort is made.
So we have a motion and a second.
Mayor
Ms.
Gear?
Hunt, would you take the vote?
Mayor Gear?
Mr. Young?
the last point to add to what Mr. Walters said, and Mr. Walters, I do agree with you. I really do. I do think that since we already know that Mr. Bowman and the team has already volunteered, the local transit team has already volunteered talking resources and everything, I say that we bring them to the table. So when you meet to try to come up with a proposal, it looks at all of our assets.
Okay.
So thank you.
Okay, let's get this to Marcia, and then we can talk about it. Marcia, would you take the vote, please?
Mr. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Walters,
Yes.
Ms. Cleland McGrath,
Yes.
Ms. Moulton,
Yes.
Mr. McDougall, I'm sorry, Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Carter,
Yes.
motion carries.
Okay. So do we have, any other council members have anything to say? All right, so at this time, and members of the audience, I don't see another hand up. At this time, we will get to work at the staff level, and we're going to move forward in our agenda tonight. Item 6B, which is our Commercial Avenue Complete Street Project, Phase 1, 11th to 13th Street alternatives. This is a discussion with possible action, and it is also open to public comment. Mr. Buckemeyer, welcome, and Mr. Holman.
Thank you, Mayor. Council, my part's going to be very brief. After our last meeting, Mr. Holman and his team went out and investigated the effects of closing or altering the Safeway entrance. And that's Mr. Holman and his team are here to report tonight on their findings about that. Just to kind of remember the goal that we're looking for here this evening is a head nod or a direction from city councils on our next steps, whether we should proceed with a roundabout or maybe start designing a signalized intersection. So that's all I've got, and Mr. Holman will take it and lead it from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Gear, members of the council, members of the public. I wanted to run down real quick. This evening, I've got Brandon Gonzalez. He's a senior associate with Alta Planning and Design. He's the project manager for the consultant team. And I also have Andrew Bratling. He's the senior transportation engineer with Transportation Solutions, Inc. He's the lead traffic engineer on the project. Before I bring them up to share about our further analysis on Safeway, I wanted to run down real quick, once again, kind of a reminder of the public process we've done on this project. This project really started way back in 2015, 2016 with the development of the South Commercial Corridor Plan that went to multiple public open houses. I think it went before council multiple times as well, with chance for public comment on all of that, all of those. It also was integrated into the comp plan when it was developed, last updated in 2016. It's all over various parts of that comp plan, and that obviously has gone to multiple public hearings as well. It's been part of the capital facilities plan, I think every year, just about since 2016, with public hearings for the adoption of those plans. And also starting in December of 2019 with the actual project following the grant awards that we received. We've done 2 public open houses, one in person back in 2019 December, and one just recently starting in December, a virtual one online, starting in December of 2020, running through January of 21. The reason I brought all that about was to remind you that this project wasn't really originally conceived as a roundabout project. The roundabout concept has really come as a result of all that public outreach. As part of that public outreach, we've had lots of discussions with stakeholders, including WashDOT. We've met with local businesses surrounding the project area, listened to their needs. for the continuation of running their businesses. We listened to the values that were expressed by numerous members of the public at both those public open houses. And one of the things that really kind of rose to the top, there was lots of great input on all of those, but the one thing that kind of rose to the top is that safety for bikes and pedestrians is important and a value of the city, but also valued at this integral intersection of the city is that we, don't sacrifice the flow of cars as well. I think that was pretty clearly stated by multiple of you on the council, and we heard that loud and clear. And that is really what led us to the roundabout concept. We took it, we took all that to heart, and the roundabout concept allowed us to meet that kind of top level value of the city, but also it allowed us to realize many of the other ones. It was kind of shocking when we first looked at the roundabout and we saw that it met many of the needs, and some that you would say are very kind of disseparate. And so that's why we brought that to you about 3 weeks ago. And you guys kind of gave us a head nod at that time. We'd like to continue moving that forward. But you guys asked some real good questions about the Safeway entrance and asked us to go do a little bit more analysis. So we went and took a couple weeks and did that, ready to provide you with that tonight. And so I'm gonna introduce Andrew Bratline. He's the Senior Transportation Engineer with Transportation Solutions, Inc. And he's gonna kind of share with you the two memos that are in your packet. It's some real technical sort of traffic data, and he's the one to present it. Thank you, Andrew.
Great, thanks, Tim. Thank you, Council. Hello again. This is a follow-up to our last meeting. I think it was the 1st of February, where the discussion kind of left off at the point that we're going to analyze some possible closure of the Safeway access at that 12th and Commercial intersection. And so I'm just going to touch on that memo in a really high-level fashion. I don't want to necessarily get in the weeds unless you would like to, then I'm happy to. But I want to just kind of summarize what we did and the results that we were seeing. And so we really analyzed two things, and you can break the first thing down into two parts. So we analyzed the Safeway access closure and what that would mean both for Commercial Avenue and 12th Street in terms of delay and queuing, and then also for Commercial Avenue and 11th Street just to the north. We know that intersection is a two-way stop, and so it's operating near capacity in the future. And so we wanted to make sure that the redistribution of traffic associated with that Safeway closure wouldn't have significant effect on that intersection to the north. And so kind of the methodology we used to analyze that Safeway closure was just to say that in closing the Safeway access, vehicles are still going to come and go from Safeway, but they're going to use different driveways. And so in general, they would kind of find the shortest path. And so they would redistribute to the driveway to the north or to the south, or in some cases to the east. We know that the access on the south end of that Safeway site is, it's almost a kind of a back door. It's maybe less visually desirable. So it might have a little bit, slightly less desirability, but in general, a shortest path is not a bad way to go about this. And so we redistributed the traffic, and then we looked at, what would the results be? And so what we landed at was that by making that Commercial Avenue and 12th Street intersection a three-leg signalized intersection, and of course, assuming this narrowing alternative, because this is a variation of the narrowing alternative, you do reduce delay slightly at the intersection. As a whole, intersection delay goes down by 5.4 seconds per vehicle. So it's not a significant decrease, but it's a slight decrease in delay versus the four-legged alternative. Delay is still slightly higher than the no action alternative. So in other words, it's still slightly more delay than if you had just done nothing. But that's you know, kind of to be expected when you're providing that narrowing cross section on commercial. But the positive impact really wasn't as significant as we might have expected it to be, due in large part to the redistribution of demand. And so by closing that Safeway driveway, you're sending more vehicles up to 11th Street. And so now they have to get through on the southbound approach. And so they still have to use that signal. And so what's actually happening is it's increasing queuing slightly northbound and southbound as vehicles are kind of making those through movements. And so you're still having queuing impacts on 13th Street to the south and on 11th Street to the north, pretty significant queuing impacts. The other negative impact is that 11th Street really kind of, for lack of a better word, it kind of blows up. You're sending about 200 additional PM peak hour trips through that intersection. And so whereas we had, I think, a level of service D in the non-closure scenario, that gets up to level service, I would call it like an F- in the Safeway closure scenario, which would indicate you would want to do something to that intersection. It's not to say a Safeway closure would be impossible, but it would require some more work and investment at that intersection, in my opinion. And so you would get some westbound queue stacking that would then start to impact not only the Safeway site, but it would stack to Q Avenue potentially to the east. And so that would be something to think about. It would take a little bit more evaluation to figure out what to do at 11th Street, but a two-way stop wouldn't be working very well at that point.
Mayor Gear?
Mr. Young.
I hear and understand the explanations you're giving and that you've taken, and I appreciate that you've taken the extra look, Tim and team, as well as, you know, the consultants, to look at the concern that was expressed. And that concern was that with the roundabout there, that, you know, the normal queue up at that front door at Safeway would be further exacerbated by the fact that we've got a continuous movement of cars that's looking to go in, if they're looking to go in there. And I think that what I'm looking to see, and I'm not sure I got the full answer I was looking for, because I fully expect that there has to be some modification, either to 11th or 13th, or some way to enter, or if it's one way going in and another way coming out, or if that's in front of Safeway is an exit out. I do think we have to recognize that if our worry has been about that queuing up, with it comes the consideration that we do have to look at all the other options. And I think that it's a worthy review. And so I guess I'm looking for a little bit more of a deep dive in the modeling, in the sense that, at least from my view, even though we say that it's not going to change and we're going to have some effect on 11th and 13th, we still have that fundamental issue of the queue up. And since we're dealing with this, why not look at how we can improve it such for the future, and given the number of, you know, locations and more traffic going to the islands. So I just think that it's something we should look deep into. And so that I wanted to express my concern with not really having full modeling of the other approaches.
Sure. Thank you, Councilmember Young. And I also wanted to, I'll get into this next piece of the analysis. I got a little long-winded in the on-street queuing piece, perhaps, but we did also look at on-site queuing at the Safeway access. And so that would be that kind of site ingress queuing with vehicles potentially stacking into the study intersection. And so, as you mentioned, there can be the potential for queues stacking into the existing signalized intersection. One phenomenon that can happen in the existing condition in any signalized alternative is this effect of queue platoons, or kind of slugs of traffic entering the site in rapid succession. So 3, 4, 5, 6 vehicles entering in a platoon. And so that would, relative to a roundabout, that would result in higher queuing on site and greater potential for stacking into the study intersection. One benefit of a roundabout alternative would be that by creating a more regular or random arrival pattern on the site ingress, that it would mitigate that platooning effect and it would reduce the likelihood for stacking into the study intersection. So one analysis we did actually was what's called a Poisson queuing analysis, which is something that we'll do sometimes for a drive-through queuing analysis, or some queuing analysis where you have generally random arrivals and more or less fixed service rate or a fixed throughput at a choke point. And so we made certain assumptions about the Safeway on-site queuing. We observed that there's a stop bar on the Safeway site I think it was about 100 feet east of the signalized intersection. And that stop bar, we could assume is a point where vehicles would stop and wait for pedestrians to cross. They might drop off passengers to get out and go and bring their bags into the store and so forth. And so that might be a point where we would measure kind of a queue beginning point. And so we looked at that when we assumed, just for the sake of analysis, we assumed a 20-second service rate. And so we said that people are going to arrive onto the Safeway site and stop for 20 seconds. That could be more or less, depending on pedestrian demand or what's going on there. But what would be the likelihood, given random arrivals, so something you might see with a roundabout, what would be the likelihood that that queue would impact the study intersection? And so what we found was that given a 20-second service rate and a 100-foot storage distance, so that's about 4 passenger car length, there would be a slightly less than 1% chance of those on-site queues impacting roundabout operations in the PM peak hour. So again, there's assumptions baked into that, but we wanted to just get a general sense of what would the roundabout queue potentially look like. And the purpose of this too is to say, now, if we decide to move forward with a roundabout alternative, we need to keep that in mind when we're laying out the roundabout and defining the footprint and the location of it. Keep in mind that on-site queuing, and then also keep in mind any improvements that can be made to on-site circulation, because in many ways that's, I don't want to say it's a Safeway problem, but it's a problem that is heavily influenced by what's going on that site. And maybe there's mitigation strategies that the city and the property owner could work through together, and without that driving the intersection design, if that makes sense. So that's kind of the high level overview of the analysis that we undertook, but I'm happy to discuss any questions that may come up.
You answered my question, because my biggest issue wasn't necessarily the design of the roundabout. The issue was the result of the queuing that has taken place. And the question was, would that queuing at the Safeway door be exacerbated simply because of the continuous flow of traffic? And that's what I wanted to make sure was addressed. And you also said that it doesn't prevent any modifications of the structure of the the parking lot or any of those other things. So you've answered my question, and I appreciate it. Thank you, though.
Thank you.
Mr. Young, to reiterate, these are all things that the design team fully intends to address and continue to look at throughout the design process. You know, we've kind of brought you our final planning level concept, and that's exactly what we're asking, is to be able to move forward into the design process to begin to solve these exact problems. And we're hearing the concerns that you on the council are sharing with us very clearly.
Council, anyone else have questions? Comments? Mr. Walters and Mr. Miller.
I appreciate your review of these things. I think it's been reviewed at this point as probably as well as it could be. I do think it's useful for council to identify these types of issues that might slip by the engineers or just are sort of outside of the traditional scope of the intersection design. So I'm comfortable moving forward with the next steps on design at this point. I do also, though, want to put in a plug for pedestrian crossings of Commercial Avenue south of the intersection, because I have had constituents reach out about that. And I also share that visceral concern that when you're going through a roundabout, there's a lot of things going on. And at 12th and Commercial on Sundays at noon, there might be even more things going on. And if that continues, I do worry about too many distractions and not looking for pedestrians. I think somebody suggested that maybe we might look into the rapid flashing beacon tech for that location, and I certainly think those work great, and they're relatively cheap improvements for even retrofits. So for this, I would think we would want to do that. So anyway, I just encourage you to look at that as you move forward in design, and otherwise I'm comfortable moving forward at this point.
Thank you. Mr. Miller.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I appreciate the team's review, in-depth additional review of this. I think we all realize how important that intersection is and how much it affects all of us, plus not to mention the 2 million cars on their way to the islands. So again, the additional review was worth it, and I appreciate it. And I also, I know you're looking for the head nod. If you need a motion, you can get it to move forward with the plan as presented, which I think is you wanting us to endorse the roundabout as the preferred alternative for the intersection.
All right.
Yeah, and can I give one clarification on that?
Absolutely, go ahead.
On that preferred alternative, the reason we call it that, a motion tonight to select a preferred alternative wouldn't be a guarantee that under all situations we're going to build a roundabout. That means we're going to look at it even harder than we already have. It means that we're going to give it our best shot. But obviously during the design process, things happen, and we would come back to you with any modification that would happen from that planned concept.
Okay. Additional comments from the council? Okay, what would we like to do with this evening?
Here.
Mr. Walters.
I guess I kind of thought that we'd done this at our last time we discussed this, but I guess we can do it again. I move to approve the selection of the preferred alternative and begin design of the intersection improvements.
Second.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second and a third. So motion by Mr. Walters, a second by Mr. Miller. Any other discussion? Ms. Hunt, would you take the vote?
Mr. Walters?
Yes.
Ms. Cleland McGrath?
Yes.
Ms. Moulton?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Carter?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. And before I close the meeting, I also want to compliment Mr. Holman and the design team for going the extra mile with our citizens. I know you've had some tough questions. You've delved in, you've given good information, and I really appreciate that. It goes a long way with our community. So bringing everyone with us is a really wonderful way to proceed with especially a project like this. So I want to commend you all for that. And at this time, if there's nothing else, I will adjourn tonight's meeting. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, members of the audience. And we'll be back same time next Monday night. Good night.